Border, a World Insight special on CGTN. I'm Tian Wei. Almost 2 months have passed since Indian troops crossed the China-India boundary in the Sikkim sector. China considered the Indian action illegal and urged the Indian trespassers to immediately and completely withdraw. Although the Indian side has discussed diplomatic solutions, their soldiers still remain. So, who's right? Who's wrong? Why is the dispute happening now? If the latest bat not resolved, what is the danger? But then, what is the real solution? We have invited a very strong panel from both China and India, face to face, word by word, to articulate their views and make their voices heard. Right after this.
Patience running thin. Border tensions between China and India are rapidly approaching a third month, the longest standoff since China and India went to war over their borders in 1962. Dozens of Indian forces and one Indian bulldozer are still inside Chinese territory. The Chinese Foreign Ministry reiterated Chinese sovereignty over the Doklam Plateau, stressing its unflinching position. New Delhi must withdraw all of its personnel behind the Indian border immediately and unconditionally. India cited so-called security concerns as well as protecting Bhutan's territory as a pretext to cross the China-India border in the Sikkim sector in June, a violation of long-time boundaries along the Donglong or Doklam Plateau. But the Bhutanese government has been silent on whether it sought Indian military help. Meanwhile, the Indian army has ordered the evacuation of a village close to the border. It is not immediately clear whether the evacuation is to accommodate soldiers or to protect citizens in case of a skirmish. As tensions rise, could the border situation spiral out of control?
You're watching The Border, a special program on CGTN with World Insight. And join me, very strong panel, both from China and India. Very honored to introduce Senior Colonel Zhou Bo, Director from the Center for Security Cooperation with the Office for International Military Cooperation with the Ministry of National Defense here in China. Welcome, sir. Also joining us, Mr. Hu Shisheng from China as well, Director of the Institute of South and Southeast Asian and Oceanian Studies at the China Institute of Contemporary International Relations. Welcome. Also joining us, two Indian guests, Professor Tansen Sen, who is the Director of the Center for Global Asia, Professor of History with the New York University in Shanghai. Also joining us, last but certainly not least, Mr. Atul Aneja, who is the China correspondent of The Hindu. Welcome. Thank you. So, gentlemen, let's jump directly into the discussion. Can you help us to understand what is the latest situation on the border? Senior Colonel Zhou.
The latest situation is that right now there are about Chinese soldiers standing eyeball to eyeball with more than 40 Indian soldiers in the place called Doklam, which China believes is Chinese territory, while India believes it is a dispute area between China and Bhutan. So this is ironic in that for the first time in our history that in spite of the ons and offs of our relationship, in spite of the trespassing of the two troops, because the line of action control is not demarcated, this is the first time that we end up standing eyeball to eyeball in a place where we should not have any tension or standoff at all.
All right. Is that ironic to you, Professor Sen?
Well, the situation is in dire straits, that's true, and whether or not it should happen is an issue that was perhaps created by China by building the road. When that is what started all these things off, it's not that the troops moved, but there was a construction happening in a disputed area that, as you mentioned, and this is an area that Bhutan, India, and China, all three of these countries are liable to talk about. So without getting consent from either Bhutan or India, I don't know if China should have started constructing a road there. And China has done this before with the Pakistan-occupied Kashmir as well.
No, I strongly disagree with you because, as I said before, this is what India believes to be a disputed area. China holds that this is absolutely Chinese territory. China, yes, is building the road, but that is an area which is, first of all, is Chinese territory, and secondly, is under China's effective control. Third point is, even talking about building road, India has never ceased to build a road on your side. Have we ever complained about your building road? No, we didn't say much. You build a road along line of action control. You build a road in Arunachal, which China believes is Chinese territory. So building a road is not the issue. The issue is India now is in the territory of other countries. While you are not invited, while you trespass into Chinese territory, that is the core of central issue.
All right, let's go to Mr. Eneja to respond to that as well.
Yeah, and there are two competing narratives which are coming over here. And one is the Indian narrative and one is the Chinese. The Indian one says that there was an agreement in 2012 between the special representatives of the two countries where a decision was taken that in areas which are not clarified, which include the tri-junction area where the Indian narrative says the standoff is taking place, that the status quo should not be altered. And from the Indian perspective, the status quo was altered when China started building the road in this area. The Chinese position, as I understand, takes its root from the 1890 treaty, 1890 convention of Britain and the Qing dynasty of China, which is supposed to have said that the alignment of the border will follow a certain watershed principle. Now, I don't see any problem in accepting, the Indian side accepting the watershed as a principle. The problem really arises in certain detail, in certain specific areas. I'm happy that we have this common principle of the watershed. Now comes certain specific trouble spots, and that, as the 2012 agreement said, the tri-junction is one of those trouble spots. I think the real debate now is how do we clarify the tri-junction?
Several things, Mr. Hu. First of all, the status quo. And secondly, whether this area, as being mentioned by our Indian counterpart, is the issue that China is talking about.
Status quo, maybe we have different understandings. To the Chinese observation that it is for the Indians already break the status quo. Even Indians' constructions even transpass the ridges even into the Chinese controlled territories. As you mentioned, 2012. We didn't call it agreements. Maybe it is a mutual understandings by the two special representatives.
What's the common ground?
There is some understanding on the tri-junction. But why we haven't specified the tri-junction? Because one of the basic reasons that China and Bhutan haven't demarcated finally the border. So we haven't clarified in the longitude or latitude. That's kind of specific. But in the 1890 treaty, it is written in black and white that the tri-junction is the snow-crusted mountain called the Jimu Mountain, or in the Asian is called Kipmochi. The crust mountain is very clear. The mountain is a mountain, right? You cannot expand it into an area from a spot to an area. That is it sounds to me ridiculous.
Okay, gentlemen, you've already brought our issue back to the year 1890. So I would like the professor of history, Professor Sun, to talk from your perspective. How do you see that part of history? Will that part of history help us to resolve some of the issues?
Yeah, it's very interesting that the Chinese side has problems with all the colonial agreements that were signed between British or the Qing dynasty, but this is the only one that they seem to accept. And it's problematic. All historical documents, maps are problematic. As a historian, I'll tell you that. And Hu Zhisheng said that the mountain, but mountain has number of sides. Which sides of the mountain? Which areas of the mountain is not just one peak. It's a whole land, and that needs to be demarcated. So 1890 treaty is a starting point, and as Atul pointed out, we don't have a problem with the watershed, but actual going on the ground, none of the people who signed the treaty actually went and saw and said that these are the lands that belong to Qing China or to British India. So when it comes down to actual ground reality, those treaties don't serve any purpose. It has to be negotiated by the two nation states that emerged in the late 1940s.
I got one word from you. Those treaties don't serve any purpose. Those treaties serve purposes?
My argument is that if you regarded the mountain, well, not a peak, not a spot, then why that it should be like this, that it is like a circle, right? Like a area, like a circle. The circle not only covering the part of China. should also cover what India controlled and also Bhutan controlled. But to my knowledge, that India already building the strongholds, even tunnels, even in the areas around the Jimumajan snow-crested peak. So that is unfair if comparing to Chinese side. We haven't even built a road connected to the ridge of the mountain.
When did the Indian build-up happen?
That is happened in 1980s.
From 1980s on?
Even before 1980s, because in the 1980s, Chinese, the geographer, which want to know the ground realities, they found that there are already 40 strongholds built around the snow-crested mountain. That is in 1980, June.
Okay. Mr. Aneja, why did you have to build, and why can't China build from the Chinese side?
No. The point is that, we have these broad formulations. Now, to come to specifics, we have the technology now to do it, and we move in that direction and sort it out.
Okay.
Rather than saying that this is ours and this is yours, this is taking a position without going into specifics.
It seems originally the place has never been decided as to who it belongs to.
No, I don't think so, because clearly the Bhutanese herdsmen actually pay tax to China as early as the 1950s. And
do you have documents to convey that?
Yes, because these kind of received as a kind of original document are still kept in Tibetan Museum, which could be seen by everybody.
And if they pay the taxes, what does that mean?
That means we have sovereignty over it. Otherwise, how could they pay taxes to us?
No, by us you mean China.
Yes.
But if you ask the local herdsmen, they would say they are not paying taxes to China. They are paying it to the local governor or local person whom they would not identify as a Chinese, but a Tibetan.
But,
I think that difference that you don't make, those people in Bhutan do make.
Yes, I clearly agree with you that when they paid to the local government. That is clear. But after 1949, then who is the local government in Tibet? That is Chinese government.
It's not very clear. It doesn't happen. I mean, according to you, it's perhaps very clear who is the local government. China does not take control of entire Tibet until later. So in 49, many of the territories which are now under People's Republic of China.
But you are also talking about 1959, right?
Yes,
we're not just talking about 1949.
This is the big difference of the historical views about the political entity of Tibetan. This is the contrasting differences. But there is a ground reality is that there is not only one country in the world except even once the independence of Tibet. This is quite clear.
What exactly is the fundamental issue in this dispute? Okay, we can go back in history. We can look at every document. But the fact is very clear. You have a People's Republic of China. The United Nations recognize People's Republic of China, and Tibet is part of People's Republic of China. Let's put that aside, because it's only making things too complicated for all of us to work.
Sure.
Here's the thing. Senior Colonel Zhou, what do you think, if we want to look for a solution, the fundamental issues we need to look at this?
The fundamental issue is India now has changed its tone. In the beginning, it claims that China has invaded the Indian territory, right? In your press, you keep changing your tones, and now, according to you, this is not Indian territory. So, who allows you to come to this part of the world in which India should not be a party?
Whose territory is it?
It's a disputed territory. It's nobody's territory.
Disputed territory among whom?
Between Bhutan, China, and India.
Okay.
But so that was the 2012 important issue, and this is where Indian conceptions...
ridiculous. At most, it is some misunderstandings of the territory between China and Bhutan. India is no party.
I haven't heard even from Indian government that this is an issue among China, India, and Bhutan.
That's what was covered in 2012.
There are two things. One is the tri-junction identification. We don't have a clarity. The second thing is, why did India go in? Your question. Well, there is a dispute between Bhutan and China. Professor who I have spoken to him earlier, he says that's between us then. It's between Bhutan and China.
He said the worst thing would be that, but the most is
between Bhutan and China.
Okay, let's just hear what he exactly said. You probably put your words together to help us understand what exactly you said.
No, of course, the Dongla area is under Chinese effective control for so many years. If there is some misunderstanding, that is at most misunderstanding between China and Bhutan, while India is not one party
Okay, so your question is why is India involved in a dispute, if there were any dispute between China and Bhutan? Is that what you meant?
The logic here is that India want to seek absolute security by violating the Asian treaties which respected by both governments, India and China, ever since they established formal diplomatic relations.
Okay.
This is the ground reality, right?
Please.
Now, why is India there? The two issues. One, that there is a dispute between Bhutan and China. There is no ambiguity here. There is a letter, the démarche, which came from the Bhutanese side to China when the Doklam incident started, wanting the Chinese troops to move away and not build the road. The second thing is a public statement by the Bhutanese ambassador in New Delhi, where he's clearly saying that Doklam has been a disputed territory between India and between China and Bhutan. So there is no question about that. Now I come to the second aspect. If it's a dispute between these two countries, that is China and Bhutan, what is India doing there, right? Now I want to respond to that specifically. India has a defense treaty with Bhutan that if there is a treaty which was signed first in 1949, which has been replaced by another treaty in 2007, which is a security treaty, that if there is any threat coming into that, the treaty kicks in. And on the basis of that legality, Indian troops go into this territory which Bhutan claims as its own.
Senior Colonel Zhou, you obviously do not agree with our Indian counterpart. What exactly are you trying to say?
First of all, yes, the Bhutanese government declared a démarche, which I have all reasons to doubt, that is made under India's pressure. Because is Bhutan under Indian pressure? All South Asian small neighbors are under Indian pressure. And that is why you live in no amity with any of your neighbors. Let's just raise an example.
Yes, very big assumption. I don't know.
Let's raise an example. Yeah, you should be a good neighbor to Sri Lanka, right? But when your Prime Minister Modi visited Sri Lanka the year before last, that was described by your newspaper as the first time in 28 years. Your two countries is just separated by a small strait. Now let's talk about the treaty. That was the 1949 treaty and the 2007 treaty. Yes, I read the treaty. So in the 1949 treaty...
The treaty between Bhutan and India.
And India, it says that the Bhutan agreed to be guided by India in external relationship, right? So that's exactly what it was described. So how can any sovereign states would agree to be guided by a country on external relationship? If it agrees, that means there is a kind of request. Otherwise, how can one agree to something? Then this kind of treaty would not hold water. That is why you have to change it in 2007, when now we have entered the modern era, when such kind of monopoly would not work anymore. And in this treaty, you actually mislead it, because you say that in a response to threat, so therefore you actually act together. But even in this treaty, black and white, it just asks you to have a close coordination on issues of mutual national interest. Remember, this is a... No.
Security clause, Article 8.
Yeah, but you did not specify that to be trespassing into the territory of other country. So I tell you, you actually made another announcement one day after Bhutan's announcement, right? The next day you made a declaration. So I have a reason to assume, why could you make a declaration so quickly? Because you're well prepared, because you know what Bhutanese government would say. So therefore you have already prepared something, and in this declaration, you have written it with all ambiguity. For example, you do not call these people to be soldiers. You just say you send in personnel. You just say you have a coordination. But you dare not say one thing clearly, that you are not invited. So you try to veil your declaration with ambiguity. That
All
is
right.
the purpose.
Several things. Okay. What is the nature of this relationship between India and Bhutan, Senior Colonel Zhou has a lot of doubts about. That's first. Secondly, does this treaty allow India to do the things that it is doing right now on behalf of Bhutan? Let's just put aside whether there is any dispute or not between China and Bhutan about this region. So I'll let the two gentlemen respond. Any of you?
First of all, I would say that there's a lot of speculation and assumption that comes from the senior professor himself, but I think it's all his view, and it's not ground reality. I think that's the problem. What is the ground reality? And Atul was right that I think the treaty between Bhutan and India makes it clear that India should be present when Bhutan's security is threatened, and India feels that has
it's
been...
not written like that. Clearly, if you read it, it's definitely not written that India should be there. Give me one sentence which said India should be there when there is such a kind of a national security issue.
All right. Go ahead.
Can I add to this?
You are misinterpreting the treaties.
Treaties are conceptual. Treaties are not going into details that this battalion is going to be deployed if there is going. It doesn't get into the specifics.
That's why you make use of it.
It goes after concept. I can tell you another example. Indo-Soviet treaty with which the Bangladesh war took place. It was a peace and security treaty, but never was it that the Soviet Union forces are going to come in case there is going to be a clash between India and Pakistan. It doesn't mention so. But the point, no, I just have to complete this. Clear. Treaties are made on concepts, and interpretation of this concept is part of an internal communication which takes place between the treaty signing countries. I am not aware that Bhutan did not approach India to invoke the treaty. We don't know that. And what the senior colonel is saying is an assumption that they did not, and that we just moved in well prepared. I think if you already have a preconceived construct, then you will try and fit everything into your narrative. That's the reason why we need now to actually go and talk with each other of each of the apprehensions. Because I think there's another very, very major point, which is we don't have a good constructive dialogue, a framework for a dialogue where we actually...
Let's talk about the dialogue a bit later. Let's just get the facts clear here. One of the facts, very important, that is, if you have a treaty, that is whether Bhutanese side have asked Indian side to be at the place where you are today. And according to the description, it is the Indian soldiers that are there. So, Mr. Hu, do you think, and have you heard anything from the Bhutanese side, read from the public information as well, coming from the Bhutanese government public statement also, that indicating Bhutan is asking India to be where the Indian soldiers are, in which there is a dispute between China and India?
But at least from the issue of the statement of the foreign minister of Bhutan, there was no mention about inviting it. There was no mention of coordination or cooperation. And also another event that when the Indian newspaper's correspondent asking the Bhutan ambassador in New Delhi that how do you comment on the Chinese diplomat in New Delhi saying that you are not invited, you even Bhutan didn't know your intention in sending the border troops into Zhongnan area. Then the Bhutanese ambassador respond that no comment, no more, nothing to be added to that. Because everything is clear in the statement of the June the 29th. But June the 29th didn't mention this.
So are you saying the statement is the root of the whole issue? No. The statement only came out after the dispute happened.
So many days.
So what I'm asking you very clearly, Mr. Hu, is do you know anything in public or through, let's just say, discussion with your Indian colleagues that the Bhutanese side have asked the Indian side officially to be there in the place where there is a dispute?
No.
Okay. Let's go to the side.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's the issue. I mean, the senior colonel is assuming that nothing has happened.
You know something has happened.
I mean, the no
what
comment,
is the thing you're referring to?
The treaty kicked into its place. I mean, as it should happen.
So it is the Indian interpretation of the treaty which kicked the place.
Indian and Bhutanese interpretation of the treaty, which China sees differently.
It's not a question of interpretation. It's a question of internal communication which follows. I fail to understand.
Internal communication. Do you know there are internal communication? What kind of internal communication?
No.
Through whom? With whom?
No, that is precisely the point. when something like this has to happen, it is based on internal and confidential communication. I don't have an idea whether the fax went or a telephone went or anybody, but neither I can challenge any of my Chinese colleagues knows that either.
Okay.
This is going to be something which is going to be declassified at a very later stage. We will not know. We do not know.
So, okay, all right. Mr. Eneja is suggesting there might be some secretive channels.
Normal
Normal channels.
Normal government channels, and yet those channels are not making to the public what they communicated with one another, even on the issue of the border. Even when the border issue has become such a controversy in this world, this time, there is no public statement. Senior Colonel Zhou, how do you reflect on that?
Well, I think that is a perfect excuse. No, imperfect excuse used by India whenever it comes to such a kind of a coordination. Well, let me give you an example, which you cannot deny. When Nepal and when Bhutan have some power problems with you, what did you do to them? Sanction of gas, diesel. This is known to everybody. So all these small
What did they do?
neighbors,
Tell us.
Well,
we don't know.
we were also the
Please
first
let him finish.
responders.
Please let him finish. Yeah.
they have sanctions on Nepal, not more than one time. So whenever these small countries, have something different, so India would behave like a big brother, which uses its
So
pains.
is it any different from China and Japan, China and Vietnam?
That's not.
I think we are getting away from the actual issue and bringing in issues that are not.
What is
relevant.
the actual issue?
Issue is how to solve this problem.
No, the issue is let's get the facts clear first
Facts-
before we try to solve the
Facts are
problem.
not clear because we have to go to the ground to make the
The
facts
issue-
clear.
There is
They are
one
narratives.
issue. There is one issue very important. That is, who will have a say in this? Who
Everybody
will have
should.
really? Who will have a say? Let's hear from different sides. Who will have a say? Is it China should have a say in the final solution?
Right.
Is it India that should have a say in the final solution? Or is it Bhutan, which has been absent from this discussion because their soldiers are not there in this discussion about the solution? Who should have a say?
Well, all three should. I mean, that was the framework that I think India had talked about in 2012, that this is an issue that involves Bhutan, India, and China. And all three sides should sit down together. And I think a multilateral negotiation is needed here. Bhutan and China have talked for 24 rounds. India and China have talked for 20 plus rounds. Nothing gets solved. But this is a place where three different states can talk with each other. And this is the mechanism that needs to be employed in other parts of the India-China border as
Okay,
well.
here, Professor San, if I understood right, the Chinese stance, the Chinese were appalled by the fact that one thing that has never been disputed through various administrations of India over the past few decades now becomes such a controversy. And India is all of a sudden asking all sides to discuss.
No, that's
Okay,
not true.
discuss what?
No, that's
About
not true.
what? And where should the discussion come from?
Exactly. I mean, that 1890 convention did not really mark the lines of actual control. As we pointed out in the beginning of the show, that the actual reality is not clear. And this area has been in dispute between China and Bhutan.
No, 2 points. I still couldn't figure out the reason why we noticed what we are going to do twice. There is no formal response. Then suddenly you use such kind of radical way to stop. So what is the reason behind it? You just want to create the standoff? This is very important.
Before you go to the second point, when you say we, meaning I guess China notices the relevant parties. What was the notice about?
The notice is that we're going to building a normal patrolling road because we even haven't a road.
And when did China do that?
That is one is in May the 18th. The second is in June the 8th.
And what was the response?
No response from your side.
So from the Bhutanese side?
No. Let me try to clarify one thing.
All right. Here's another crucial issue.
The spokesman of your Ministry of External Affairs said he would neither acknowledge nor deny that they have received Chinese notification. This is, to me, very strange, because either you receive it or you haven't received it. How can you say, I won't acknowledge it or deny it?
There are only
Can I respond?
two choices, right? According to you, it says whether you receive it
Yeah.
or you did not receive it.
And from China, a note definitely can be received from Chinese entities.
All right. Then.
How can you not receive
First of
it?
all, they're not their ministry official. Of course, they wouldn't speak for their ministry, but that is confusing, to say the least. Mr. Aneja.
Well, I find this interesting that there was these two letters, one in March, as Professor Hu said, and the other in May. Letters sent to India stating China's intention to build the road, as I understand. Now, if you go by the 2012 agreement, this road is being built in the Tri-Junction area. How can you give a post facto that you are going to build it? If you have the intention of building the road, you have to consult the three countries that we intend to do. Is everybody agreeable? Here is an announcement saying that we are doing it. There is no pre-discussion. That is what is required under the 2012 agreement, because this is a tri-junction area.
Okay.
And therefore, I find it very, very strange that this is information being conveyed without even a discussion.
And may I add also that
is
why
not the
send
right
a letter to India if they think India is not concerned?
And second point, I would just want to add, if this is not any disputed area, there is no question of a letter.
Yes.
Now let me compare this. Suppose you're building a road from Lhasa to Yadung. It is an undisputed, you're going to build a railway over there. India may have security apprehensions, but nobody can object to it. And there is no question of any letter going to India that we intend to build a road.
So why
the
was the
very
letter?
fact that you're sending a letter means there's a history behind the particular area, and that's very clear.
No,
and that's itself an indication that this is probably the disputed area.
Yeah,
and
but
therefore
you
it
still
requires
haven't answered the question which is raised by Senior Colonel. Let's just answer that question first.
can
Why
see that?
is your ministry people? Which ministry is that?
So your mutual foreign affairs.
Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Okay, is saying something either denying or admitting that they have received any notice
Because
from the
he
Chinese
was asked by
side.
your people about this question.
neither of us are privy
I know
to
you are not from it, but
Yes.
the
That's
attitude
for the Ministry of
itself,
External
the
Affairs to answer.
attitude itself is interesting, isn't it?
As,
If things needs to be figured out, why facts are not being stated?
Has China released that letter or letters?
Would you like to? respond?
Has China released those letters that were sent to India?
Well, certainly, I also read this.
No, have they released a letter or not? Or letters? Have the Chinese made public the letters that were sent to the Indian government?
No, I don't think so.
So how do you know what's in there? Maybe there's something in the
Because
letter.
your spokesman answers this publicly.
But as long as you don't know what's in the letter, it does not make sense for any country to say that we have received the letter and maybe it's
Well,
a
No.
It is a matter of fact.
It's
Rather,
a response.
okay, all right.
It's a response
Okay.
from your spokesman to your own people. This is what your spokesman
So they may
said.
have reasons. So
What might be the
I think
reason?
it's
That would
very
be
important that
interesting.
We are not representing the government of India
Yes.
here.
You are not
What-
representing,
yes.
but
What is
we
the
are
government of
here to
India going
analyzing
solve
it.
about
We are not witness to history back in the year 1990, 1890, but we are talking about it too.
Sure.
But Mr. Hu, let me get you also to talk about that. Who should have a say here?
One thing is that when you said that security is becoming a concern, you say whose security? I'm still wondering. Does Bhutan really feel his security be threatened? I'm still wondering. Then to the ground reality is that China even didn't build a road to the ridge, according to the 1890 treaty, while the Indians' strongholds or the military frontier tunnels, even I just said that transpass the ridges. So you have already created a symmetrical advantage toward Chinese side. So
In a disputed area.
But again,
in the
this is
disputed
something
area,
that has never been brought up in either the negotiation between India and China or Bhutan and China.
That is because China thought we both
This is
respect
something new
the treaty.
that you are saying today.
That is now you created
but
that
the
trouble.
fact that India has built something is your saying. Chinese government has not said that in 1980s, have they?
No, that is why China
So-
said, we already respect it. So China didn't blame it. Okay, this if if you are according to the 1890 treaty, it is your right. So now Chinese government found it is also Chinese right to catch up with India side. That is, I think,
Okay, here's the issue.
very
So why
reasonable.
we are building the road is
Well, we
not
don't know if we are building a
something
road.
out of creating, but
this-
Chinese side
You
it
get much
is.
connected
So
from that side.
The
All right.
nature of the whole thing is that India using the so-called security concern to challenge the sovereignty of another country. So if in the Kashmir issue, if China step in, claiming that because one Belt One Road will go there and India is interfering, therefore we should support Pakistan. Should we do that? Have we ever tried to do
We
that?
started building a road in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir.
No, building a road doesn't mean we support each other's
it's just
claim.
it's
We're
a
not
disputed
changing the claim.
territory that
There is
India
we
claims.
make it very clear. The road just passing it, not affecting each other's sovereignty claim of the disputed
all right,
area.
you're watching The Border, a World Insight special coming to you from CGTN. We'll be back after this. We have come a long way. Changes happen, and fast, from all corners, different lives, voices, and visions. Encouraged to think, enlightened to change. World Insight with Tian Wei go beyond the headlines. Welcome back. You're watching The Border, a special program of World Insight on CGTN. I'm joined here by a strong panel made of both Indians and the Chinese. First of all, Professor Tan Sen coming from India, Mr. Atu Aneja from India as well. From the Chinese side, Senior Colonel Zhou Bo and Mr. Hu Shisheng. All right. Breathe, gentlemen. We just had a great debate, but now let's go to the most important part. We have to solve this issue. We cannot let the dispute go on. So, let's just ask this question. What is the best scenario? What is the worst scenario if we don't have it resolved? Professor San.
The best scenario is that we come to a negotiation and the troops there withdraw to their own sides. The worst is, of course, some kind of a battle, armed conflict, which we don't hope will happen. But I think India and China have created a mechanism to talk, which is a major accomplishment in the past few decades, that our officials and the Chinese officials have almost always come and talked to each other and negotiated some sort of settlements. Many of such things have happened in the past, and not even a single bullet have been fired. So I think that is a good mechanism to follow. So my hope is that something similar will happen. There are many things happening politically in China and in India. But I think the officials, the bureaucrats, have a system to talk to each other and resolve this. So for me, the best scenario is nothing bad is going to happen.
Nothing bad is going to happen, but with principles, right?
Yeah, I think they have a channel to negotiate with each other, talk to each other. I think they will come to an understanding on this as well.
Mr. Hu, at this point, is it the time to talk? When China has what they call the sovereignty issue about this?
The most difficulty the two governments facing is that the two sides' observation or views on this issue totally different, totally opposite, which seems to me that make the both governments have very little room to budge. So that is make the situation more complicated. According to Chinese government official position, that the mistake is created by Indian side. So Indian first to correct the mistake, then we have all the various channels. Then we can engage with each other.
According to you, Senior Colonel Zhou, I have to ask that question as well, because you're coming from the Chinese military. So your worst scenario and your best scenario.
The worst scenario is a war, which
Can China and India afford that?
well, that's a good question for Indians to think about. When Professor Tan Sen talked about the confidence building measures made in the past, I'm fully aware of this. Actually, I have written an article telling people in China Daily how the good lessons from China Sino-Indian border could be applicable to China's Diaoyu Island issue with India and with South China Sea dispute between China and some claimants of ASEAN countries. But this time, the scenario is different because it's not about the China-Indian border. It's about India trespassing into Chinese territory. This is what the Chinese believe. So the whole background is different. So we in China, in Chinese government and in PLA have made it quite clear that India must withdraw its troops unconditionally. Before that, no talks will be held. And there is one advantage of Chinese soldiers, that is the psychological effect on Chinese soldiers because they believe they are standing firm on Chinese soil, while your Indian soldiers can never be assured that you are standing on Indian soil.
Okay.
And that is the fundamental difference.
Can India do that? Why not doing that?
These two strong governments on either side. You have the Chinese led by a strong president, and you have a Prime Minister Modi who, and both sides, the nationalistic feelings have risen to a very great height with this issue. I do not think that there will be any unilateral withdrawal from the Indian side. They will look at all the consequences, and I can assure you that there will be no unilateral withdrawal.
All right.
The question is, then what next?
The war is terrible. It's not good for either China or India. But how can we avoid that? We already got that in 1962, which is such a big thing for Indians psychologically. I know that. And to prevent the war, another war from happening, the solution is really very easy for you. I know all what you are thinking now is how to save face. I know this. But remember, the Greek historians Thucydides said, what actually is the trigger of the war? Three things: honor, fear, interest. For you, you probably would say that you go there because of your interest, because Bhutanese interest. But for China, the top priority is honor. So compared to losing in a war, it's more affordable for you to lose face for the Indian government this time.
All right. I guess we are already reaching the last stage of our discussion. I know all of you have more ammunition toward one another in such a debate format, but I'm so glad that all of you come together. Before we go, I do want to have one summary of your opinions, whether it's about history, whether it's about the future. Let's begin with you, Professor Sun.
Yeah, I think we should forget what happened before 1940s and talk about China, India as two nation states dealing with a very actual problem. And I think they should come to a conclusion of solving this problem.
All right. Mr. Hu.
Let's be honest and respect history and the ground realities.
All right. Mr. Aneja.
We need to resolve, and war is not an option. But at the same time, I do wish to say that there is an assumption of China being on a moral higher ground on this issue. I don't think any Indian believes that.
All right. Senior Colonel Zhou.
As I have written in an article, India, on this matter, is at a disadvantage, morally speaking, because of the two facts. Number one, you're not invited. Number two, you step in the territory of other countries. So you have no moral ground, as you have said. Again, I would repeat that it is a sincere wish that our two peoples and two countries could live in amity. But the ball is your court as to what eventually might happen.
All right. And with that, we're coming to the end of the special program, The Border, a special program of World Insight on CGTN. May I say, as the host of this debate, it is my great pleasure to have the four of you to come together and discuss. Thank you so much, Professor Tan Sen Sun, Mr. Atu Aneja, Mr. Hu Shisheng, Senior Colonel Zhou Bo. You've been watching our special program